Sinovac third clinical trial has gone well with no side effects found in the volunteers. Go international to Africa. Wicky Adrian will construct a multi-purpose sport complex in Solomon Islands. Good afternoon, viewers in Indonesia and Singapore. Market Headlines is ready to provide a number of informations from the business, economic, and capital market sectors. With me, Fajar Wayong, and this is Market Headlines. Yes, viewers, let's open up Market Headlines with good news related to COVID-19 vaccines finding after 1 month of Sinovac third clinical trial. Everything has gone well so far, in the sense that there were no significant side effects found in the volunteers.
The clinical trial will last for 7 months, so that if everything goes well, Indonesia will be able to get the results by January. And if everything goes according to plan, Bio Farma will produce vaccine by January 2021. And for the next step, Bio Farma will immediately report and request a distributions permit to the government to be immediately produced in January 2021. Then the company will be able to vaccinate public under the Ministry of Health program.
Uji klinis sudah berlangsung lebih dari 1 bulan dan alhamdulillah semuanya sampai ini berjalan lancar. Dalam arti kata tidak ada ditemukan efek samping yang signifikan terhadap sukarelawan. Uji klinis ini akan berlangsung selama 7 bulan sehingga kalau semua berjalan lancar, Januari kita sudah mendapatkan hasilnya dan ini akan segera kita laporkan kepada Badan POM untuk segera mendapatkan emergency use authorization terhadap vaksin ini dan kita segera akan memproduksi dan nanti akan segera dilakukan program vaksinasi yang segera akan dilakukan programnya oleh Kementerian Kesehatan.
On the other hand, President Joko Widodo emphasized that the government continues to work hard to face COVID-19 pandemic, while at the same time preparing vaccines for 170 million to 180 million Indonesians. He hopes that this vaccine will be done by the end of the year of early 2021. From Jakarta, Rika Wardi for IDX Channel.
Deflation strikes again as people purchasing power slip down in September. Statistics Indonesia recorded deflation of 0.05%. That way, the inflation rate is 0.89% as in year-to-date. As there was a deflation of 0.05% in September 2020, it means that Indonesia experienced deflation 3 months in a row, from July to September. July recorded deflation of 0.1%. August recorded deflation of 0.05%, and September recorded deflation of 0.05%. Statistics Indonesia also reported 56 cities experienced deflation, while 34 cities experienced inflation. The highest deflation occurred in Timika at 0.83%, and the lowest deflation occurred in Bukit Tinggi, Jember, and Singkawang, each 0.01%.
Berdasarkan hasil pemantauan BPS di 90 kota inflasi, pada bulan September tahun 2020 ini terjadi deflasi sebesar 0,05%. Dengan adanya deflasi sebesar 0,05% pada bulan September tahun 2020 ini, maka tingkat inflasi pada tahun kalender adalah sebesar 0,89%, sedangkan tingkat inflasi tahun ke tahun atau Y on Y adalah sebesar 1,42%.
Meantime, in the other hand, Statistics Indonesia recorded slim increase of August foreign tourist arrivals, whereas the number only went up by 4.45% month-to-month.
Based on the data from Statistik Indonesia, the number of foreign tourist arrivals reached 165,000 with the proportions of 54.2% from Timor-Leste, 35.3% from Malaysia, and 2.2% as of China from August 2022. The number of foreign tourist arrival throughout August 2020 was a very in a slim figure, whereas the realizations edged up only by 4.45% compared to July 2020 and still fell very deeply to 89.22% compared to the same period of last year.
Pergerakannya sangat flat yang mengindikasikan bahwa recovery untuk Wisman ini akan butuh waktu lama, dan ini sangat tergantung kepada penanganan kesehatan baik di Indonesia maupun di negara-negara lain. Secara mantuman jumlah wismannya memang mengalami peningkatan, tetapi tipis sekali. Tetapi kalau kita bandingkan secara Y on Y, jumlah wisman ini turunnya masih sangat dalam sekali, yaitu sebesar 89,22%.
Suharyanto announced that the movement of foreign tourists was very flat, which indicated that the recovery would take a long time. And besides that, Statistik Indonesia believed that recovery of the number of foreign tourists will greatly depend on healthcare in Indonesia and in other countries. Jakarta, Rahajo Patmo for IDX Channel.
Most of ministers predict that Indonesia's economy will turn into deep recession. However, Minister of Cooperatives and SMEs is still optimistic that third quarter will not be worse than the second quarter. Thus, he believes that the recession level will not as deep as it is expected to be. Through virtual discussion, Minister of Cooperatives and SMEs, Teten Mastuki, delivered his optimism that national economy will get better along with government's National Economic Recovery Program. Recession is undeniable, but he believed third quarter national economy will be better than the second one, which was contracted 5.32%. Moreover, second quarter economic downfall experienced by Indonesia was not as severe as other countries in the world. For instance, such as Singapore minus 23%, United States of minus 9.5%, even European Union, which was minus 14%. Therefore, again, he is pretty much sure that Indonesia's recession won't be as deep as expected.
Ketika dunia sedang mengalami resesi, kita tidak terlalu parah kontraksinya. Kalau kita bandingkan dengan Singapura saat ini sudah minus 23%. Ya, Malaysia juga cukup tinggi, lalu Amerika juga saya kira 9,5% minus, Uni Eropa 14,5% kalau tidak salah. Jadi kita sebenarnya masih cukup baik, dan memang kemudian kita diramalkan juga oleh lembaga-lembaga multilateral, kita termasuk negara yang akan lebih cepat pulih.
Market headlines will be right back after this quick break. Stay tuned.
Senang sekali saya David San Oval dan dapat hadir menemani Anda dalam program spesial dialog webinar on TV.
Setiap minggunya kita akan membahas tema-tema yang sangat menarik. Apa kabar ibu-ibu sekalian?
Alhamdulillah baik.
Salah satu ambisi daripada Kementerian Koperasi dan UMKM bersama Smesco adalah koperasi keren, baru, digital gitu kan, yang kita bisa IT.
Baik saja tidak cukup, kita harus betul-betul memahami lingkungan bisnis global yang lebih baik plus di dalam negerinya sosiologi dan antropologi supaya totalitas kita membantu petani secara efektif.
Kita memang ketahanan pangan, tetapi kita menuju ke kedaulatan pangan.
Ada shadow power yang mendikte pembangunan sektor pertanian bukan oleh Kementerian Pertanian.
The World Bank estimates that Indonesia's 2020 economic growth will be in the range of -2 to -1.6% year-on-year. This projection is worse than the previous consensus, which was 0%. The World Bank estimates that Indonesia's 2020 economic growth will be in the range of -2 to -1.6% year-on-year, which is the first negative growth in the last 2 decades. The latest forecast revises the previous World Bank forecast, which was 0%. The World Bank argued that Indonesia's economic contraction occurred because the handling of the pandemic in terms of health was not optimum. Chief economist for East Asia and Pacific World Bank Aditya Mato explained that the Indonesian government has not succeeded in overcoming the coronavirus pandemic. According to him, Indonesia is one of the countries in the Asia-Pacific region that has yet to show signs of economic recovery in the near future. He even said that the government's large-scale social restrictions or PSBB policy was less effective, so that it worsens the outlook for Indonesia's economic recovery. Meanwhile, in 2021 and 2022, the World Bank estimates that the Indonesian economy will go through a recovery process, even though it's still overshadowed by risks and challenges related to the successful handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. From all sources for IDX Channel. Again, the World Bank trimmed Indonesia's economy forecast in 2020 and 2021. What are the main reasons beyond the latest forecast, and how should Indonesia respond to it? Let's talk about it through these following graphics. We're going to the first graphics. Well, this is the World Bank's forecast on East Asia and Pacific. The previous forecast on July 2020, World Bank forecast Indonesia economic growth in this year at 0.0%, while the latest forecast on October 2020, the economic growth of Indonesia in 2020 is predicted to only reach -1.6% to -2%, while in East Asia and Pacific, the growth in 2020 will only be at 0.9%, or the lowest since 1967, while the number of poor World Bank predicted in East Asia and Pacific will reach 38 million people. And responding to the World Bank's latest forecast, the head of Fiscal Policy Agency, Febrio Kacaribu, said that the World Bank's revised growth assumption was in line with what the government had calculated, while the latest government assessment estimated that Indonesia's economic growth will be in the range of -1.7% and -0.6%. The Fiscal Policy Agency stated that the World Bank assessed various factors due to the escalation of the COVID-19 pandemic, such as restrictions on mobility, increased health risk, and the weakening of the global economy had put pressure on domestic demand, both consumption and investment activities. Meanwhile, regarding forecasts in East Asia and the Pacific, the World Bank reported that the governments of countries in the East Asia and Pacific region have allocated an average of 5% of the value of their GDP to improve health systems, help households maintain their consumption, and help companies avoid bankruptcy. However, some countries have had difficulty extending their limited social protection programs, where previously they spent less than 1% of their GDP. And from 2020, what about the forecast for economic growth in 2021? And to get a clearer information, we're going to the next graphic. And for 2021 economic growth forecast for Southeast Asian countries, we can see in the graphic that Cambodia is predicted to only reach 3 up to 4.3% in 2021, while Indonesia only 3 up to 4.4%, and the Philippines, the economic growth in the next year only 2.9% up to 5.3%, and Malaysia is a little bit higher at 4.4% up to 6.3%, while Vietnam 4% up to 6.8%. So this is the lower growth and the upper growth of economic growth forecast from the World Bank for Southeast Asian countries. And viewers, from the graphic we can see that the upper limit of Indonesia's economic growth in 2021 is only slightly higher than Cambodia, while when compared to the Philippines, Malaysia and Vietnam, the upper limit of Indonesia's economic growth is quite low. And regarding this, chief economists of East Asia and Pacific from the World Bank, Aditya Mato, say that Indonesia's economic growth projection this year and next year depends on controlling the spread of COVID-19 and accelerating the availability of vaccines. However, in 2021 and 2022, the World Bank estimates that the Indonesian economy will go through a recovery process, even though it's still overshadowed by risks and challenges related to the successful handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. The estimated economic growth in the 3% up to 4.4% range takes into account the impact of a low baseline, as well as a reduction in potential growth of minus 0.6 percentage points compared to pre-pandemic conditions. And in order to accelerate economic recovery, the World Bank provides a number of suggestions or advice for Indonesia. What are those? Let's move on to the next graphic. And this is the advice for Indonesia to recover from recession from the World Bank. The first one is increase capacity to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And the second one is starting fiscal reform. And the third one is expansion of social protection. And World Bank give advice for Indonesia to support companies in order to prevent bankruptcy and unemployment, while this last one is strengthen reforms in the trade sector. So in order to accelerate economic recovery, the World Bank suggested that Indonesia should not rely solely on domestic market forces. Accelerated economic recovery is considered possible if the government carries out structural reforms in the trade sector. And in addition, government policy support has not reached many companies. Business Pulse survey data shows that only a small proportion of companies receive direct support from the government. The share varies greatly by country, where Indonesia itself is still less than 10%, while in the Philippines and Vietnam it reached 20%. And in particular, formal financial institutions may not reach many SMEs as they are mostly informal and micro enterprises, which are not part of the tax or financial system. And on the other hand, the central bank or Bank Indonesia has recorded buying government bonds directly. However, this move actually raises market concerns about the erosion of the independence of the central bank that has been hard-built. So as World Bank has issued forecasts for Indonesia in 2021, how is the target of Indonesia's economy in the next year in the state budget? Let's check through the next graphic. So the government and the House of Representatives have agreed the key number in Indonesia 2021 state budget. The first one is GDP growth, which is set at 5% in the next year, while average consumer price index or inflation is set at 3%, while rupiah per US dollar at 14.600 per dollar per US dollar, and 10-year bond yield 7.29%, and the state revenue is targeted to reach 1,743.6 trillion, and the state spending 2,750 trillion, while budget deficit for the next year is set at 5.7% of GDP. And viewers, Finance Minister Sri Mulyani Indrawati ensured that the government would continue to maintain a credible and accountable fiscal policy in order to support economic recovery and sustainable growth. And in addition, the government is targeting an open unemployment rate in the range of 7.7% to 9.1%, and a poverty rate of 9.2% to 9.7% in the 2021 state budget. It is lower than the government's projection this year using the toughest scenario of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in response to this, core economist Yusuf Randy estimates that unemployment will fall next year, but will be contributed by the increase in workforce in the informal sector. Many workers affected by layoffs this year will switch to the informal sector, such as online taxi riders or even small business and trading and so on. He estimates that their average income will decline, and then it will become a challenge in achieving the poverty level target next year. And viewers, support from all parties is needed in the process of economic recovery. But of course, the role of the government must be optimized in order to achieve the economic recovery and the targets that have been set. So stay tuned with us. Market Headlines will be right back after this quick break.
Hello, I'm Clara Antawijaya. I'm Associate Producer and News Presenter on Market Headlines. As Market Headlines starts at 4:30 p.m., which is in line with the closing market, therefore we summarize market conditions only for you. And my job in here as a journalist, I give concise and accurate news for the audience. And also, being a journalist is not only a job for me, but it is also a passion.
Saat ini lebih mudah untuk mendapatkan informasi mengenai perkembangan ekonomi dan bisnis di Indonesia dengan aplikasi IDX Channel. Mulai dari berita, makro dan mikroekonomi, politik hingga hiburan. Anda juga dapat berbagi artikel, foto, dan video ke semua platform media sosial yang Anda miliki. Beragam informasi hari ini bisa di-download di dalam aplikasi idxchannel.com. IDX Channel, Your Trustworthy Economic, Business, and Capital Market Channel.
Nama saya Devisa Novel, jabatan saat ini di IDX Channel adalah sebagai produser dan sekaligus presenter program yang dibawakan saat ini dengan nama IDX Second Session Closing, terkait juga dengan kondisi capital market Indonesia dan perkembangannya dari waktu ke waktu. Dan saya sangat senang untuk belajar dan berkecimpung di berita ekonomi, khususnya di capital market.
Thanks for staying with us on Market Headlines. Yes, viewers, at the Jakarta Composite Index intraday movement earlier today, JCI was open at the level of 4,899.84, and then approaching the closing time on the first session, the index was on the level of 4,919.42. And then the index was showing strengthening trend by the second session closing time. Index was closed at level 4,970.09. And in short, JCI went up by 2.05%. And next, we're going to see the sectoral movement leading the dynamics of today's trading. We got infrastructure as the leader of the strengthening trend that went up by 4.97%. Miscellaneous industry went up 2.8%. Finance went up 2.66%. And agriculture went up 2.66%. And next, viewers, we're going to see the intraday movement of rupiah towards US dollar. So, rupiah opened at the level of 14,876. Rupiah was also showing weakening trend towards US dollar and was closed at the level of 14,955. And in summary, rupiah went down by 0.69%. Wijaya Karya was officially appointed to build a multi-purpose sport complex in Solomon Islands with the total contract value reached 112 billion rupiah. Wijaya Karya was officially appointed by the National Hosting Authority representative of Solomon Island government to build a multi-purpose sport complex in Solomon Islands with a total contract value reached 112 billion rupiah. Director of Operations 3, Wijaya Karya Sugeng Rohadi, said that this project will be built with building quality standards that are resistant to natural conditions and good weather, including hurricanes and earthquakes that often occur in the Pacific Islands. For this reason, in addition to material purchased in Solomon, certain materials will be imported from 3 countries, namely Indonesia, Vietnam, and China. According to the director, this contract proves that the company continues to record positive performance amid the COVID-19 pandemic, which has a global impact. Meantime, with the latest contract in Solomon, WIKA is now working on projects in 10 countries spread across Asia, the Pacific, Middle East, and Africa, including the Sanying MRT station in Taiwan, Lembang Bridge in Malaysia, the Presidential Palace of the Republic of Niger, and social apartments in Algeria. From all sources, IT Action. As a step to expand Mitratel's capacity before conducting IPO, Telkom, as Mitratel's parent company, would consolidate telecommunication towers owned by Telkomsel. Before Mitratel carried out the IPO, Telekomunikasi Indonesia or Telkom as the parent company would consolidate telecommunication towers owned by Telkomsel as a step to expand Mitratel's capacity. According to Telkom's Vice President Investor Relations, Andi Setiawan stated that currently the company has 34,025 towers, consisting of 18,000 towers belonging to Telkomsel and 16,000 towers belonging to Mitratel. Telkom plans to increase Mitratel's towers by consolidating existing towers in Telkomsel. In the first stage, Telkom will consolidate around 5,000 up to 6,000 towers belonging to Telkomsel to Mitratel. This consolidation will enable Mitratel to become the largest tower provider in Indonesia. After the capacity increase, Telkom just made plans to unlock Mitratel. This can be done through an IPO or through cooperation with strategic partners. This unlock plan is not only intended to raise funds, it's because Telkom is still able to inject funds into Mitratel. The main purpose of unlocking is to increase Mitratel's valuation. As a tower provider company, Mitratel's valuation is below the industry's valuation of 10 up to 11 times. From all sources, for IDX Channel. Indonesia Stock Exchange recorded until the end of September, there are 59 issuers that finished stock buyback, whereas the realization value was 4.05 trillion rupiah. On the other hand, Indonesia Stock Exchange noted that currently there are 12 issuers that plan to do stock buybacks with a general meeting of shareholders. Target realization reached 2.5 trillion rupiah. IDX Director of Listing, Igede Nyoman Yetna, said that a policy regarding relaxation of stock buyback without general meeting of shareholders has made issuers eager to do stock buyback. And up to now, there have been 59 issuers that have realized the program. As for the value, has reached 4.05 trillion rupiah. Yes, viewers, step aside for market condition as coronavirus pandemic takes big role on current economic situation, and here is an update data about coronavirus globally. And the graphic close our market headlines today. Please enjoy our next program on IDX Channel, Your Trustworthy Economic, Business and Capital Market Channel. I'm Fajar Wayong. Have a nice evening.